What do you think of when you think of the word harbor? The main definition of harbor is haven, refuge, sanctuary, shelter, a place of security. But then there's the notion of harboring resentment, which involves holding on persistently to spite, anger, and bitterness. When we harbor resentment, no place can offer sanctuary, because our sense of outrage and offense follow us like our shadow wherever we go. When I think of harboring resentment, I think of a woman living in a small apartment struggling to feed and clothe 3 children, while their father, who divorced her, is watching football on his large flat-screen TV with his new girlfriend in their house in another city. When I think of harboring resentment, I think of the daughter of alcoholic parents who were never there for her. The daughter who had to not only parent herself most of the time growing up, but who also had to parent her parents. When I think of harboring resentment, I think of the young patient with terminal cancer whose doctor misdiagnosed the problem for over a year, who now lies in a hospital bed surrounded by plastic tubes while his family is wetting his lips with a sponge to keep him comfortable as his body gives in to the disease, knowing that it might have gone very differently. And when I think of resentment, I think of 2 sisters. The older sister left home as soon as she had a chance and barely spoke to the family again. And the younger sister, who became like her mother's only child and who took care of her mother in her old age, even having her mother move in with her for the last decade of her life. There were endless doctor's appointments and the incessant red tape of medical bills and medical insurance and the need to install a wheelchair ramp in the front of the house. The younger sister thought that she was pretty much over her outrage and longing for her older sister. But when the sister appeared back in their lives only weeks before their mother died, seeking forgiveness, she realized she was still harboring a lot of resentment. What makes you think that you can just wander back into our lives like this? Do you really think a few kind words after decades of absence and antagonism will change anything? You come in here with your business suits telling us of your fancy career, and Mom is supposed to welcome you and forgive you. But when her mother does just that, and the younger sister chooses to stay outside, she finds herself listening through the cracks in the door as her mom, with her sister at her bedside, catch up through laughter and stories and tears. She senses the love, but cannot overcome her bitterness and resentment. In the Gospel of Luke, when Jesus is being interrogated for the 3rd time by the scribes and Pharisees for cavorting with sinners, tax collectors, lepers, and women of the night, he responds with 3 stories, each telling of something lost and then found. One of the stories is the prodigal son. We're told of a man who has 2 sons. One son asks for his share of the estate early so that he can go off and live his life in the way he wants. And the father gives it to him. Like many fathers, he probably wants his son to be happy and independent and wants him to be able to find his own way in the world, only to discover that the son squanders his wealth on wild living and shames himself and brings shame upon his family. What was the father thinking, giving his son so much money and so much freedom? You can just hear the neighbors whispering. What kind of father does such a thing? And then when the son comes crawling back in disgrace, the father immediately embraces him with great joy and tenderness and throws him a party fit for an athlete returning from the Olympics with 9 gold medals. What's up with that? There's no rebuke, no request for penance, no building of trust, rebuilding of trust. No wonder his brother, who's remained at home dutifully working the land and tending the animals day after day, year after year, is seething. His father never threw him a party. And now his father is cooking the calf that he worked hard to fatten to celebrate his brother and to welcome him back into the family. What happened to reap what you sow? What happened to facing the consequences of your actions? With stories like this, it's no wonder that Jesus is such a threat to the scribes and Pharisees. Think what happens to a society when it starts to reward bad behavior and inadvertently punishes the good folks who are doing all the work. In the parable of the prodigal son, the father is supposed to represent God. So what kind of God is this that Jesus is proclaiming? One clue we have is that in explaining to the scribes and the Pharisees why he's palling around with sinners, Jesus tells us 3 stories. Stories of something lost and something found. Jesus tells of a lady who loses a coin, and then she finds it. When she finds it, sweeping the floor, she is overjoyed, and she calls her neighbors to come over and rejoice with her. And he also describes a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep in order to find one lost sheep. Well, anyone who knows anything about shepherds knows that the sheep need the shepherd to protect them from predators. So when the shepherd decides to wander off to find the one lost sheep, he puts the 99 in danger. It does not make any logical sense to put 99 in jeopardy to find one. So what's Jesus up to in telling these stories? Do you realize that this is the first time in the Bible that God is presented to us as loving us unconditionally? Prior to this set of parables in Luke, God is most often presented as wrathful, punishing, judging, and God's love is presented as conditional. But Luke, he's a universalist. And so it appears was Jesus. This is a God who, like the father in the prodigal son, loves all his children, regardless of our recklessness, mistakes, and failures, and despite our judgments and self-righteousness and resentment. It is an idea of God that teaches us that when we live without love as our primary source of motivation, we are lost.